Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Inertia Creeps with me, Niall O'Carroll. I'm very excited today to have Crystal Nicholls joining me. What isn't commonly known about my career, I suppose, is that I've worked in sport, obviously, and business and whatever. But I have spent a lot of my time consulting with the Royal Ballet Schools, with Elmhurst in Birmingham, which is a particular passion of mine. Not ballet, but working with a school that has ambitions to do really great things for kids, and the environment they've created there is so lovely. So Crystal is a West End performer, and we'll be talking about The Lion King and many other things in a little while. And a coach, and basically has devoted her career to helping people thrive on and off the stage in the West End. Crystal, I think that's fair to say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me as well.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's the whole point of this show is that we get to talk to really cool people who have vastly different experiences, and I love the idea of kind of I learn from every guest I have on. So this kind of is what I thrive on, I suppose. So I'm really looking forward to the chat, and I suppose to start with, what I usually try to do to begin with is just to let the guest kind of let the audience know exactly who you are and where you've come from. So tell me a little bit about your dancing career and why helping people thrive on and off the stage in the West End is important to you.
Yes, so I am from Barbados. That's where I was born, that's where I grew up, and that's where I got my first start in training for dance. As dancers do, I started when I was 3 years old, fell in love with it. Obviously went to like one of the best studios. I would say I'm a bit biased, but one of the best studios in Barbados, where I did primarily ballet training, and then I started a bit of jazz when I got older. I moved to Canada when I was 18 to get my professional training. And in Canada, our training was ballet, modern, and jazz. So it was very well rounded. We also did a bit of singing, a bit of acting. So I got a really well rounded training experience there. And then after that, as soon as I graduated, I did some cruise ships just to get out of Canada. Not that Canada is lovely, but I realized that
I
it
love
wasn't quite
Canada,
the
full
same for me.
disclosure.
Yeah, the thing, I love Canada. It just wasn't the scene for me for dancing. I knew that I wanted to do more musical theater type dancing. And Canada does a lot. I think their dance scene is more of the modern contemporary dance scene. So yeah, I did some cruise ships just to kind of save some money, travel the world, get me out of a country that I love. Um, when I was home in Barbados on a break, funny story. Lion King happened to be in Barbados auditioning the very week that I was home on a break.
Oh wow.
So I know, right? Talk about serendipity. So I went to the audition not expecting anything. So very low pressure because I genuinely, even though I had created a vision board when I was on the cruise ship and I put the Lion King on my vision board, in my head, I thought that I was too young to get cast in it for some reason. I just felt, right now I'm too young. This isn't quite my time. So I'm just going to go have fun, let them see my face, see what happens. So I went in, no pressure at all. I got to the final. They said, okay, we might contact you if there's a spot for you or not. So then I was like, fine, because I had a plan and my plan was to go to New York. Long story short, I won't get into that, but I wanted to go to New York and I had a whole plan. So after this contract, I was like, I'm going to go to New York. Anyways, I got back on the cruise ship for my final contract, and the Lion King contacted me 2 months into that contract and said that they're offering me a spot in the show in the West End. And of course, I said, yes, of course. And the way it lined up, I actually started rehearsals for The Lion King a month after I finished the cruise contract. So there was no conflict. It was perfect. I was able to go home, get get everything together and move to London smoothly.
Amazing. There's a guy I love who does a lot of work with, or I've done a lot of work with him over the years, but he wrote a book called The Serendipity Mindset. Um, a guy called Christian Bush, and he's his whole philosophy is about kind of being open to timing and how every interaction you have in your life is has the potential to radically affect your life in, good, most, obviously he talks about it in good ways, but every interaction we have affects our lives. And it's to all, life is about timing, and so many people tell stories about relationships where two people happen to meet in a random location. I always find it really interesting that the Irish, so like, full disclosure, like you, I've traveled the world, and I probably spent most of my adult life finding reasons to get out of Ireland, even though I love Ireland. So I totally get where you're coming from with the Canadian thing. But it's that idea that two, you hear it all the time, like two Irish people will travel to Australia, two completely different times, and then meet in a bar in Australia, fall in love, and live the happily ever after and stuff like that. So I love that kind of the concept of serendipity. But you came to London, and you danced on stage on the West End in the Lion King, and your career kind of took off from there. You've had a career in the West End, and now you're coaching in the West End. So, to take you to that point that you were just going to say. So why coaching? Like, what is the difference, do you think, between the performer mindset and the coaching mindset?
That's a good question. I so when I actually found coaching, so I'm just gonna backtrack to just say that when I did Lion King for 6 years, and that show is just a very difficult show to do. But I got to my fourth year, and I was just burnt out, and I really struggled in that fourth year. I think I was fine. The first 3 years I was fine, and I really struggled in the fourth year. And it was just because I was so exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. So when I discovered coaching, which was actually what helped me to get out of that burnout, and then after that I did my final 2 years at Lion King, and I felt so much better. I had the thought of, why did no one teach me these things? I felt that the coaching approach was so, it was just I don't want to be that person, but there was just something magical about that, unlocking your thinking and discovering more about yourself, discovering tools for yourself to bring that resilience, to build that confidence that I had never learned. And I just remember thinking, every time I learned something, I actually had the thought, if I had learned this when I was training, it would have made a difference. If I had just learned this thing, oh my goodness, I could have applied that to this situation and this situation. And that's when I just thought to myself, wow, this is something that I need to do. This is something that I need to focus on for performers, because I know that it's going to make a difference. And that kind of planted the seed for me in just wanting to make the industry better, and seeing that what I'm going through is what everyone else is going through. But the difference is, I have the support of a coach. Like, I have that support, and that's why I'm able to be more confident, be more resilient, you know, all these things that we actually want. That's the difference. And I just knew that this is what the industry needs, and this is so lacking. And I just wanted to make, it came from a genuine place of wanting to make the industry better and to bring something that I knew would really help.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that. Actually, the concept of resilience is something we hear people talk about all the time, and obviously, I've worked a lot with people on that kind of trying to create that mindset. But when you talk about resilience as a performance, a performance art professional, I mean, obviously there's the auditioning and becoming familiar with rejection, and there's that side of it. But tell me a little bit about the challenges you faced as a performer, and where you felt the lessons you learned were something that could benefit other people.
Hmm, that's a good question. I think having the grit, I think, is something that performers just have because of the nature of the industry. You just said it. You are constantly auditioning, and you never know when you're going to actually book a job. And having that resilience, having that grit to just keep going in the face of people constantly saying, you're not good enough, you're not thin enough, you're not enough, like, choosing to show up despite that is something that performers build over time. The successful performers are the ones that don't give up. And I like to say, I honestly, I genuinely feel that when you reach a certain level, Like once you've reached a certain level of training, everyone is talented, right? Everyone is good enough, technically speaking. So the thing that separates the ones who make it and the ones who don't is the not giving up. Because it's easy to just walk away after, you've heard 50 no's or how many other no's. What separates those people from the ones that make it is that the ones that make it are the ones that just said, I've heard 50 no's, I'm still going to go to that next audition. So the having that grit, having that, resilience, having the will to having your will be so strong that even though I've been knocked down this many times, this dream of mine is so important that I'm going to get back up and face possible rejection again just for the chance of having that dream come true. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say that, people could learn from just the industry itself, how to have grit, how to just keep going in the face of it.
And there's an element too of understanding. I mean, I know I've come across it in my career, but understanding that life isn't fair, and just because you feel you deserve something doesn't mean you're going to get it. And to switching that mindset. And I know, I mean, look, we've seen it recently with Disney have um, Ariel, the Little Mermaid, and they cast a black woman as the Little Mermaid, and there's uproar and panic, and people are losing their minds over a cartoon, and the challenges that are out there. I mean, whether it's losing out, and we see it all the time in the corporate world. There's the conversations around gender equality for pay. There's conversations around racial inequality. There's conversations around challenges for people who are transgender, people who are neurodiverse. There's constant conversations about things that just aren't fair. But in the performing arts area, have you found that that was a particular difficult challenge, particularly when you're coming from Barbados, via Canada, to the UK and to the West End, and you're performing that roles that may not be typically written for a black dancer, say, for want of a better term, are that you're closed off from certain roles because the access isn't there? Or has that changed dramatically? Because we hear a lot of talk about how society is changing, but has it changed?
It is changing. It hasn't changed dramatically. I think it is something that the industry has become aware of, and people are taking active changes, to improve it. But I wouldn't say it's something that has changed dramatically, even within, I would say, the last few years. So for me, one of the challenges that I faced was that because I am a black dancer slash singer within musical theater, I always get put up for the same types of roles. So, I'm always typecasted. I put basically all the black musicals. So Tina Turner, Hamilton, um, yeah, obviously did Lion King. But the problem with these roles is that people, casting directors will invite me into the audition expecting me to have a certain type of voice. They expect me to have the voice that matches these roles, the typical black gospel singer voice. And I don't have that voice. So the
How
problem
dare you?
I have, I don't so the problem that I have is that they see my spotlight profile. They look at my CV. They look at me. Oh, she's a black singer. She's a black dancer. In their heads, they immediately think, oh, she's gonna have this voice. And then those are the roles that I get invited into auditions for, and I don't have that. I don't have that voice. And of course, I'm not gonna book those roles because I don't have the voice. But I don't necessarily always get invited into the auditions that are not the typically black roles. So it hasn't changed that drastically. And this is up until, I mean, I haven't done an audition in a while just because, I've taken a step back from the industry because I have a toddler. But the last thing I auditioned for was in 2021, maybe. And I still had the same problem. So I wouldn't say it's changed that dramatically. Um, there have been steps like in on Wicked, for instance. Wicked has cast they have a black alphabet and a black, what's her name? The other lead, I forgot the other lead. They have two black leads basically. And Wicked isn't really considered a, a quote unquote black musical. So that was a big step. That was a big deal. But other than Wicked, it's still not very. There's still a lot of people that get pigeonholed for certain
And
roles.
is it difficult as a mom and as a mom of a toddler? I'm assuming the demands when you take on a role become pretty much all encompassing. So is it a kind of thing where it's virtually impossible as a mother to do it, or do you need like ridiculous supports around you, or has the industry started to acknowledge that you know there are different types of people in the world?
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's not. They don't make it easy. They don't take it into consideration. So I know a lot of moms who are doing really well in the industry, but that's because they have a lot of support. So the moms that I know that are doing it are moms who they have their parents around who will look after their kid when they have to do 8 shows a week or whatever it is. So the moms that I know that are doing it have the support to do it. It's not something that the industry takes into consideration actively. I don't think they really give it a second thought. I don't think it's something that even comes up for them.
And I suppose I can get it, but it's at the same time, it's all part of this conversation about appreciating people's difference and opening up doors to people who, understanding people's challenges and just getting to the theater. I suppose it does tie into when you talk about resilience that there's like the pressure to perform at the highest level can take a significant toll on your mental health. And where you talk about resilience and you talk about managing disappointment and all the different challenges that you faced in your career and the kind of things you're helping the people you coach now, um, can you talk to me a little bit about like strategies you might use to manage stress or anxiety, or ways, things that you might have used or things that you help the people you coach now to handle the pressures? Because anyone who understands high performance environments knows that pressures come as much from outside the environment as they do within the environment. So maybe talk to me a little bit about kind of how you manage those things and how you help the people you coach to manage those things.
Yeah, well, one of it seems very simple when I say it, but for performers it isn't. So one thing that performers tend to do is that, we set these big goals and we put our blinders on and we're like, right, I'm gonna eliminate everything else in my life until until I reach this goal. And that's what performers tend to do, whether it's an unconscious thing or it's conscious. We tend to go, right, I'm going for this role, everything else has to fall off. And obviously, that the problem with that is that that's the quickest way to burn out. Like, you've dropped all your time with your loved ones, everything that makes life worthwhile, you've decided to drop because you're so focused on this goal. So one of the first things I do when I work with performers is I have them make sure that they're carving out time for. Are you carving out time for your loved ones? Like, are you making time for your loved ones? Are you making time for your interests and your hobbies outside of the performing industry? Most of the time it's no. So the first thing I get them to do is to identify the areas of their life where, they've dropped or they've neglected for the sake of the role that they're in or whatever it is. That's the first thing. The second thing is we talk about nutrition because, and you'll know this, but nutrition like is linked to your mental health as well. And it's something that the industry refuses to speak about. No one wants to talk about it. No, no one wants to talk about it, and I do understand why, because there are there's a lot of eating disorders and disordered eating within the industry, but not talking about it is not doing any favors. But a lot of performers I've found they're simply not eating enough, and a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is unconscious. A lot of it is the fact that they're busy. You're running from audition, doing a show at night. Sometimes you just don't have the time. And if you don't plan ahead, it goes neglected. So, nutrition, a lot of performers just aren't eating enough. So, we get them to, make some meal plans, like really talk them through how to fuel efficiently for their workload. Get some stress management practices in. So, again, get them thinking, what has worked for you in the past? Is it meditation? Is it, making sure you go for a walk out in nature? Like, what has worked? Journaling, whatever it is, because a lot of times they might cognitively know that something worked, but they're not doing it. And so, again, into a good routine? How can we get you to build one, just pick one stress management practice that you've tried in the past that you know has worked for you? How do we build that into a routine so that it's not overwhelming? You're not adding like a whole bunch of things into that routine, but how do we build that in? And then there's the accountability factor of having that support system. Sometimes you know what to do, you're just not doing it,
Yeah,
which is
that's
what
so
happens
true,
to all of
actually. Yeah.
us.
And
Yeah,
it's
you know what
fascinating.
to do.
Yeah, we do intrinsically know what to do, and yet when we get stressed, when the pressure comes on, we tend to fall into all these bad habits. And it's a big passion of mine in the work I do, where I focus on building sustainable habits and
Yes.
understanding that if you're going to change behaviors, it's got to be something that you enjoy doing and reward, or you'll stop doing it. And from a what you're talking about there, I mean, there's one thing, like we were talking about nutrition there, and it just made me think about sleep and how little we appreciate the importance of sleep. And I know
Yeah.
from, I had a meeting earlier on with a professor who's very heavily involved in research into understanding. I mean, they were a physiotherapist originally, but they're a kind of a research expert with the IOC now in understanding bodies and how bodies avoid injury and recover faster and things like that. And it's amazing the amount of research that's been done now about sleep and its impact on injury and injury recovery. So while you're talking about nutrition, I mean, we all have kind of had the conversation with people who say, I can survive on 5 hours sleep a night, or 4 hours sleep a night, or 3 hours sleep a night. It's nonsense. Nobody can function long term on minimum on 3 or 4 hours sleep a night. So, understanding nutrition and hydration, even, like the simple thing about
Mhm.
drinking water and how important it is for our bodies. But you're right. I'm brilliant at, well, I'm brilliant. I like to tell myself I'm brilliant. I'm very aware and I'm very good at telling people what they should do to be healthy, and then doing the complete opposite myself. I mean,
Oh
give
yeah,
me
we
that.
all do it. Yeah, because this
Yeah.
is the thing, we all do it, and that's where
Yeah.
the support comes in.
But there's an interesting one there, actually. It was a question I was going to ask you, and then you brought it up when you mentioned about the thing around nutrition, how the industry doesn't do anything to support that. But what role do you think the industry should play in supporting the mental health of the artists?
I think that I think addressing mental health should be embedded in our training from the get-go, because it's just so important to be able to succeed. It's so important to building resilience, fueling your body, managing your stress, building your confidence. All of these are skills that you need to be able to succeed as a performer. The problem is that when we're doing our training, we focus only on the vocational side of things. So we focus on how do you become a better dancer, actor, singer. We talk about audition preparation, acting through song and all these amazing things. Like, great. Those things will get you the role. Fantastic. How will you sustain it? Because the gig isn't, I get the role and I do it one time and then that's it. If that was the gig, then fine. Focusing on those skills would be amazing. The gig is 8 shows a week for an entire year. You get one day off and you do 8 shows every single week. So, how are we preparing people to go into an industry where that's expected of them, yet we're not focusing on anything else other than kick your leg higher, sing? It doesn't make sense. So, I believe that every performing arts college, every performing arts program should have some kind of course. I don't know how it would look per se, but some kind of training in resilience, confidence, stress management, nutrition. All these things need to be addressed. These are skills that will help make performers happier, more sustainable. Because I feel like the sustainability factor is what's missing. So many people quit the industry just because they just can't keep going.
Yeah, you're so right. And actually, I found when I'd spent time with the dancers in Elmhurst that like one of the things that was really lacking, and it's lacking everywhere. I mean, we never do it in schools. Stuff is the whole concept of self talk, how we talk to ourselves, and even just asking people to stop and think about like the words you're using about yourself. If you were giving the advice to a best friend who was in the same position you're in, what language would you use to talk to your friend? And why would you not speak to yourself the same way? And one thing I'm interested in, you're talking there about like having a year where you're like 5 shows a week and whatever. What happens when that stops? What happens when the music stops? How do you look after yourself when, because I suppose for all performing artists, jobbing is what you're conditioned, that's what you're trying to do. But not jobbing, to suddenly then the language, and you spoke about resilience earlier, but how do you help your students to understand that there's going to be large periods of your career where you're not working, and that you working doesn't define who you are. It's a successful moment. Equally, not working doesn't define who you are. And what's your approach to that? Because I know it's foreign for a performing artist to kind of talk about when you're not working, because that's kind of like taboo. But how like what's your thoughts on that for people? Because the reality is, even like these Hollywood actors who are making horrendous amounts of money spend probably more of their lives not working than working. So how do you balance that in somebody's head? Because I feel the thing, it becomes about the imagery of I'm useful because I'm working, and then when I'm not working, I'm useless. So how do you challenge, how do you work around that, do you think?
That is such a good question. It comes from, again, I will say, yeah, it starts in our training where it's drilled into us. It's drilled into you that, you are a performer. This is what you do. This is how you get jobs. So we start to link our worth to what job we're doing, right? That's unfortunately a side effect of our training. What the approach that I use is, you're a human being first, performer second. So everything we do comes from that place. When I said earlier about how we put our blinders on when we're like, I'm gonna get this role, I need to put my blinders on, everything else needs to fall off. The biggest thing that I do for performers is that, again, I get them to look at the areas of their life. What is meaningful to you? What have you let go of? How can you bring it back? Because the whole point of life, if you fill your life with meaningful things, so people that are meaningful to you, activities that are meaningful to you in or outside of the industry, like, I don't know, volunteer, whatever it is, if you fill your life with what is meaningful to you, then whether you're performing or not, you're going to see the value of your life. So one good exercise that I get them to start with, that if they find it hard to kind of figure out which things, they need to bring back, I always say, at the end of your day, do this for, I don't know, do this for a whole month. At the end of your day, ask yourself, what have I done today that was really worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that, you're going to start to see some patterns, right? You're going to see, because you might get to the end of your day and you might say, oh, I had a really great coffee date with my friends. So friendship is worthwhile to me. And then, the next day they might be saying to themselves, I took a dance class that was outside of my comfort zone. It felt really difficult, but pushing myself felt really worthwhile. Oh, so growth is worthwhile to me. And then they're starting to identify their values, and those values are not necessarily linked to the industry. So it's just getting them to see, what are your values as a human being, and allowing them to understand that those values are not necessarily linked to being a performer. Those are your values, and you can fulfill those values outside of the industry if you need to.
Completely. Yeah, brilliant. You're so right. And it's because that's what takes the power away then, because of the question I was going to ask you. I'm very conscious of our time, and I'm going to wrap up fairly soon, but the question I was going to ask you was, when you look back in the career you've had performing in the West End and elsewhere, and you look to the career you now have, where that's still on the table, but you're also producing the next generation of performers, um, and massively respecting the dance industry. And I know that Jess, the principal in Elmhurst, wants to talk to you about coming up to do some stuff for them. She's a big fan of yours. But allowing for all of that, like what do you what do you look on as defining a successful career for you?
For me personally,
Yeah.
that's a really good question. When I look back, even though I can look back and say, yes, I've done the Lion King, I can say all the things that I've done, but when I actually look at the experiences, it wasn't the thing itself that I value the most. It was, like, I'll take Lion King as an example. It's the people. I made some friendships. I'm still really good friends with a lot of the cast today. I made beautiful friendships. That's what mattered to me. It's not the show itself, it's the fact that I made beautiful friendships. I know that I made people in the audience happy. Like that was something that was important to me. People coming up to you after the show and saying, "Oh my god, it's been a dream to watch this show. I traveled from however far away to watch this show." That's something that I feel is really worthwhile to me. And now in my coaching, the thing that I feel really fulfills me is when I can see the growth in someone. When one of my students or one of my clients, they achieve something that they didn't think they could, or I can see their confidence growing. That for me feels successful, to see the impact that that has on that person. So yeah, it's funny, it's never the actual thing. It's not something that I've realized, it's not the thing itself, it's what are you getting from that thing. So the friendships that I've made, the people that I've impacted, to me, that's what feels successful. And it would be meaningless if I didn't have the support of my family, if I hadn't made friends, if I had gone through 6 years of the Lion King and I hadn't made a single friend, it would have been completely worthless to me.
Yeah.
Or
No,
I hadn't made a single connection.
it's a brilliant perspective, and I can see why you're such a good coach, because it's you spoke about values earlier on, and your values shine through, um, and it's about touching people's lives. And you mentioned your ambition to make people happier. You certainly made me happier in the last half hour. I really appreciate the time, Crystal. It's been fabulous. We'll definitely come back and talk more. And I hope maybe we can have a chat off air, but potentially working together at some stage, because I love everything you said there, and your philosophies and that. Thank you so much for taking the time. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.